Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the hidden drivers of persuasion. I'm Barrett Palmer. I'm the regional lead for EMEA for Mesh Experience, and I'm here with my colleague Mark.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Mark Thompson, Experience Director here at Mesh, and today we're going to talk to you about some of the hidden drivers of persuasion, and this utilises our retail banking data. So I'm going to hand over to Barrett first to kind of talk to you and give you the background to why we were looking into this and the purpose behind it.
Okay, so essentially falls into two broad sections. I'll talk you through the methodology of the study and how we've arrived at the data that we've got. And then we've analysed the data and come up with 5 rules of how to drive persuasion, and Mark will talk you through those. So just as a bit of a background, it's no surprise to us that the retail banking sector specifically has a job to do in rebuilding trust. We're 10 years after the financial crisis, and the banking sector is still experiencing cynicism and negative media coverage. I mean, Keith Weed, who's the ex-CMO of Unilever, believes that not just that the banking sector, but generally consumers are beginning to distrust advertising, do distrust advertising, but still believe that advertising has a massive role to play and is good at driving trust for consumers in brands. Added to this, obviously, there's been a massive digital revolution where there are hundreds and thousands of media touchpoints and how people access communications from brands. And it's making it very challenging for marketers and for media planners and buyers to understand how to get the biggest bang for their buck. And as a result of this, some media channels are overlooked and are not optimized. So we all are used to kind of looking at share of voice, which is what we put out there as marketers, and we have all sorts of metrics that we currently measure, like marketing spend, click-throughs, likes on social media, and we have transactional data from retail sales, etc. But all these disparate data sources sometimes can be really difficult to make sense of. And what we believe at Mesh is that we need to look at all this through the eyes of the customer. And only when we understand how they encounter brands in the real world, which is different to actually seeing an ad in a computer in a lab situation during research, so that we can understand exactly what impact the communication and their impact and their experience with the brand is having on their brand perception. The longitudinal nature of the data that we pick up allows us to look how a brand encounter can lead to other encounters, and allows us to see how this then affects their buying behavior, as well as their as well as pushing metrics in terms of consideration and trust. So, for example, we were looking for one client on investigating their online purchases, and what we were finding is that on many occasions people were buying brands that they had never mentioned that they were considering. And in one instance, what we found was that the online purchase was actually prompted by seeing the brand in store 6 days earlier. It's only through our kind of methodology that we can pick up things like this. So what that then leads to is, rather than a disparate array of data sources that we're trying to make sense of, we provide a single data source, which is all provided through the eyes of the customer, and all the experiences are driven from a customer-centric viewpoint. In conjunction with Cranfield School of Management, we then have developed our brand growth experience model. And what we found is that by measuring and counting the quality and the quantity of the experiences, that the share of experience within a particular category for your brand is a better correlator to share of market that your brand has than is share of voice. What we've also found that what drives the share of experience is that these experiences need to be positive. And it sounds very it sounds very obvious to say, but our data is showing that a positive brand experience actually has 3 times the impact on brand consideration than does a neutral or a negative one. And Mark's going to cover this in a bit more detail in a few minutes. And then our methodology picks up where those experiences have had and which channels, whether the experiences with a paid media ad experience, or was it in an owned channel, for example, like an in-branch experience or an online app experience, or was it an earned experience in terms of, was it a Twitter message or a bit of PR that has been generated from other users rather than the actual brand itself. And then we capture what the proposition was in the piece of communication that delivered the ad within that particular channel. Where was it placed? Time of day, what kind of channel it was, whether it was TV, out of home, radio, or an in-branch experience. And when was it? So if it was a TV ad, what day was it? What time of day was it? And what else were you watching at the time? So did you see the TV ad while you were watching the news, or was it when you were watching a daytime TV program? So this allows us to give a total, complete view of how a brand is being experienced by customers throughout in real time within their real world. So just a bit about how the actual methodology works. So we have a continual recruitment of panelists and participants who fill out a survey, and in that we capture image statements, their brand consideration statements, and trust statements. And then for a week they provide us with data on every single brand experience that they've had. So whether it be a TV ad or an in-branch experience, or even seeing a social media ad. And when they've done that, they tell us that they've experienced the brand, and our analytics asked them the questions: how did that experience make them feel? So did it make them feel positive or negative or neutral? And how did that experience improve their consideration? So as a result of that experience, are they more likely to or less likely to, or is there no change in whether they'd consider the brand in future? And then after they've filled out the diary for a week, we then resurvey them using similar questions to the survey before the real-time diary experience. So over the last 2 years in our retail banking study, we have now captured over 45,000 experiences across 12,000 customers. So with that level of granularity and that amount of data, the source is very, very robust, and we're able to analyze and provide insights with real confidence.
Yeah, and we see that there are kind of 3 main benefits from this type of data and the data collection. One is that it gives you a single view of the customer. And what we mean by that is we understand all of the experiences that an individual was having. And this means we can look across brand impact from paid to own to earn. And we're not looking at those in isolation. So we're not running a single study to look at the impact of an advertising campaign on an individual. But actually what we're doing is we're getting that complete picture for that customer. Second to that is we get that view from the customer's eyes, so that customer perspective. And this allows us to compare across different types of customers and different audiences to see how different experiences impact them. And finally, this is in real time. And the reason that's important is because it's much closer to the actual event itself. So we're not asking people to think about the experiences they had in the last week, or what advertising campaigns they remember seeing, but actually we're asking them at the moment of that experience when it happens, what did that do to them? How did it make them feel? Did it make them more positive towards the brand? Did it make them more likely to consider the brand? Because ultimately, if you're not, impacting someone in the moment and generating some emotion from them at the time of the experience, then we're not going to see any longer lasting impact. So we wouldn't expect, that neutral experience that didn't have any impact on them in the moment to have a longer brand building effect. So those are kind of three of the reasons which why I decided to join Mesh in terms of much more of a comprehensive understanding of what customers are really experiencing, and a much more pure view of that. And just to take the methodology further from what Barrett's mentioned before, so as explained, we have those three stages, and all of the real-time data is in that middle stage. So every time someone has an experience, they tell us about that, about which touch point, which brand, and about that experience, how it made them feel. But what we can also do is we can look at any differences in the responses from the pre-survey to the post-survey, and actually identify which of those experiences during that week are changing people's attitudes towards certain brands. So this could be someone going from a non-considerer for a certain bank to becoming a considerer at the end of the week. And we'll identify, okay, so which touch point are the ones that had the highest opportunity to create that consideration. And we can do this for all the different attributes and image statements. And this is the data we're going to use to kind of take you through those hidden drivers. So not just looking at the in-market impact at the real time, but actually understanding what changes those experiences are having on people's attitudes. And as Barrett mentioned, we're just going to go over 5 rules, 5 hidden drivers of persuasion. There are plenty more, but we've picked out kind of 5 key ones across different metrics. So rule 1, we shouldn't expect advertising to do all the hard work. And if you only focus on what you push out, so the paid advertising, then you're missing out on utilizing such a strong touch point within owned media. So what we can see here on these 2 charts, so we have one for customers and one for non-customers, is we're looking at the impact of the 3 different media at a total level to either create across the horizontal axis or maintain consideration. And what we can see for both customers and non-customers is that owned touchpoints have the strongest impact, or the biggest impact, on creating and maintaining consideration. So that's why we shouldn't just rely on paid media to do the work. And one of our manifesto points is that marketers need to take responsibility for all of their touchpoints, not just the ones they push out. And just to support that, when looking across those 45,000 experiences we have, what we find is that paid media only accounts for, well, just under half of all experiences. So actually, if you are just looking at owned media, there's 40% owned, 13% earned experiences, which you aren't factoring in, which have a massive impact on why someone would choose your brand or the perceptions they have towards your brand. And when you break this down into not just those 3 media, but the individual touch points within that, you can see a really wide spectrum of how people interact with retail banks. So what we're looking at here is all of the touch points someone would interact with during that diary week where they're recording their experiences. And across the bottom, we're looking at how positive those experiences are. So those are the percentage which are top 2 box positivity, i.e. people who the experiences which are very or fairly positive, and also persuasiveness. So how much did those experiences impact their consideration or likelihood to choose in the future? And the third metric is the size of the bubbles themselves, is the number of experiences, so the noticeability of the reach of those touch points. And again, when we look at all those individual touch points, we can see a wide array from call centers being an owned experience, very positive, word of mouth, something which is driven through earned media, again, very positive and persuasive, and also TV, which is the biggest touch point, so where people experience retail banks most, again, being a very strong touch point. So it's interesting to see that interaction and to understand all of those experiences happening and how people are really interacting with them. The second rule is that advocacy and trust are hard to shift. So it's really important to understand the touch points or what we need to leverage to do this. So we were just talking about brand consideration, which actually relative to trust and advocacy is easier to shift. So really, if you want to build trust for your brand and advocacy, then it's important to understand, okay, what is actually going to drive that? And we spoke about trust at the beginning being such a issue for advertising generally, and also for within retail banking. And it was interesting to see Richard Warren speak recently that he says I don't think that advertising creates trust. It comes from people's experiences of the bank. Now, whilst from an experience perspective, we support this, that experiences with the bank does create trust. We argue the point that advertising can't create trust. And what we see when we look at our data is that paid media does improve trust. So someone with a paid media experience is 1.7 times more likely to endorse a bank that they didn't think was trustworthy, to become trustworthy, than those without. So at a total market level, we see that paid media does improve trust. But in particular, and interestingly, we found that Lloyds was one of the better banks, or the best banks to do this, so above market level through its paid media. And again, the reasons for that, so the Black Horse is so well associated with the brand, and it's such a distinctive asset in itself. But linking that with the by your side messaging and the kind of nostalgic feeling of the advertising, we see a lot of examples where it's helping generate that trust for Lloyds as a bank, both for customers and non-customers. And picking up those experiences in the moment, we get some really rich data about people telling us how it made them feel, and how as a result of this, they see Lloyds as a trustworthy bank. And when we break that open further, so it's not just TV advertising generally, but if we look across the category, we find that social media is actually one of the strongest touch points to improve trust, which is quite different to, I think, what a lot of people may expect. But paid advertising, when it cuts through, when it's noticed, when it's picked up on, really does improve trust. And just using a Lloyds example again, we see that their mental health awareness campaign, which is a very social campaign, delivered on a social media platform, is really generating strong emotions, and people are, as a result of that, seeing that Lloyds is a trustworthy bank. So again, they are hard metrics to shift, but using paid media and using the right channels, delivering the right messages, we see these touch points can improve trust. Rule number 3 is that we see essentially neutral experiences eroding marketing budget. And really what brands and banks in particular need to do is strive for those positive and very positive experiences to really be best in class. Because ultimately, if we're just delivering neutral experiences for our customers and for our the potential customers, we're not going to really shift or grow our brand. And what we can see here is we've mapped out, again, paid, owned and earned media, but we've broken those out by positive experiences, neutral and negative. And we can see the disproportionately large impact that positive experiences have versus neutral and negative. And in particular, if we look at paid experiences, we see that positive and paid experiences is fairly similar to earned, although a positive owned experience is really where you want to be driving. But compared to that, a neutral paid experience is essentially not increasing or maintaining any kind of consideration for a brand. So again, we want to kind of minimize all of those neutral and negative experiences and really focus on understanding which are the positive experiences and making sure we deliver as many of these as possible. And one of the ways we can help to understand that is using our brand growth experience model. And ultimately, what this does is tell you how to be, how to grow your brand by generating more experiences which relate stronger to market share. We've just taken an example here where We looked at Clydesdale Yorkshire Bank and Virgin Money when they are going to be a fully combined bank, to see what would we recommend using our model to tell them and help them create more positive experiences. As a starting point, what's always interesting to look at is the share of experience a bank is receiving versus its market share. For Clydesdale Yorkshire Bank and Virgin Money together, they represent the 6th largest bank in terms of the market size. But actually, from an experience perspective, they're falling behind. They're only the 11th highest bank in terms of share of experience. So what this notifies is that in order to grow, they need to be increasing the number of experiences they're generating, and the number of experiences that are being picked up. Now, the easiest way to do that, and the quickest way to do that, is obviously to increase your share of paid experiences. But when we looked into this, actually what we found is that both Clydesdale Yorkshire and Virgin Money, their paid media experiences aren't best in class at all. They're actually behind the market average in terms of how positive they were. So we're not just saying we need to kind of spend more and push more out there to increase that share. Actually, we know we need to be improving the quality of those paid experiences at the same time to really then enhance that growth. Now, one of the ways in which we could do this is to assess the media mix. So looking at all of the channels within these two banks to understand which ones have historically worked better than others. And generally what we found is that newspaper advertising, it wasn't being as positive as TV advertising. So it's not to say it can't be, but what we've seen for Clydesdale Yorkshire and Virgin Money together is that newspaper wasn't necessarily really the right channel with the messages they were delivering to create quality experiences. But within that, we could review what messages and what propositions both banks were leading with. And we found that for Clydesdale Yorkshire, actually, whilst overall the quality of experiences it could be improved, within that there were some differences. So the mortgage proposition was better received than some of the other propositions. So again, that could be something as a quick win to dial up to improve that quality. And Virgin Money's sponsorship of the London Marathon, again, although their paid advertising wasn't as positive overall, that was a really strong message and proposition for them, although the reach of that was relatively low. So again, more there they can dial up to improve those experiences at a total level. And even within certain media, so I know we said newspaper overall wasn't creating those quality experiences, but actually that was a spectrum, and we did find that within that, the Times and the Daily Telegraph were the best performing channels, best performing papers. So actually, again, focusing on those within newspaper would improve experiences overall. And finally, context is always important, and advertising at the weekends and in the evenings, where people are more receptive, was helping to deliver more positive experiences. So again, as you can see here, just one way in which we can use the brand growth experience model to understand all of those different interactions and experiences, from the individual placements, the propositions, up to which channels they should be using to improve their experiences and generate more experiences overall. Our fourth rule is that despite moving increasingly more to a digital world, banks shouldn't forget the traditional media and the traditional touch points, which still have a really strong impact at building consideration among non-customers. So website is a really key touch point to attract non-customers, but actually direct mail is really still being really a strong touch point. So someone with a direct mail experience is much more likely to become a considerer of your brand than those who haven't had that experience. And whilst reach might not be as easy to achieve with that type of media, outdoor as a traditional media channel is, again, really impactful at increasing consideration for non-customers and can generate that reach. So it's not just focusing on the new channels, but understanding that depending on what we want to achieve and who we want to acquire, the traditional media channels are still really impactful at doing this. And finally, rule 5 is that online banking and online banking apps are really the touch points to increase consideration for customers. And it's always an interesting exercise to do, to look at the consideration levels among people who are current customers of banks, because there's quite a high percentage of people who, although they are a current customer, they wouldn't necessarily consider that bank for a future product, whether it be savings or another current account. And really, the only way to increase that consideration, taking them from a non-considerer to a considerer, is by working with those owned assets and really improving and demonstrating that the online banking app itself and online banking through the website, it works and it fits into their lives and it really improves their lives. Because paid media isn't going to be able to cut through and do that, because they are a customer, they know the experience. So we can't just go out with an advertising campaign to increase that retention or loyalty. It has to come from those experiences that people have. And really, we have such a rich pickup of people talking to us about the experiences they have. Some of these are very transactional, which in itself is really interesting to see, because a lot of the positive experiences don't necessarily need to be really big and bold, but actually just the simple things that allow people to take control of their finances, empower them to have control over their money, take that stress and worry away, and also really fit within their lives. So here we've just got an example of someone very busy in between dropping off their kids at school before going to work, and actually being able to check their balances, make a few transactions very quickly, is a very positive experience for them. So again, it's really important, if we want to maintain or really increase consideration for our customers, that we need to be focusing on the experiences through their banking app that are really positive and really enhance their experience. So just to summarize, really, we've got those 5 rules. Rule number 1 is that we shouldn't just rely on advertising and expect advertising to do all the hard work. We saw that advertising accounts for less than 50% of experiences. And within those 3 media, paid, owned, and earned, owned experiences have the strongest impact at maintaining and increasing consideration, both for customers and non-customers. So it's really important for marketers to take account of all of their touch points, not just paid, but making sure that the experience across all media is working. Rule 2, we saw that advocacy and trust are harder to shift compared to consideration. But actually, we did see that paid advertising, paid media can shift trust. And actually, we saw the example of Lloyd's being above market average in terms of its impact on building trust. And within paid media, certain channels are working harder than others. So if you get the right message landing on social media, we see that it's one of the best touch points at increasing trust for a brand. We saw that essentially neutral experiences erode your marketing budget, and that we need to minimize the number of negative and neutral experiences and make sure we're striving to deliver positive and very positive experiences, because those are the ones that are really going to have the impact and drive your brand forward. We just want to remember that, whilst there are loads of interesting and digital touchpoints around, there is still merit in using traditional media. So people with direct mail experiences are much more likely to become considerers than those without. And similarly, with out of home, we can really increase consideration for non-customers and reach a wide audience. And finally, online banking really is the touch point for customers. So we can't expect to restore a relationship with a customer through paid advertising. What we need to do is make sure that the experiences they have, especially with the online banking app and online website, are really positive. It allows them to take control of their finances. It's easy to use, it's safe and secure, and it really would then be a driver to generate those really positive experiences and allow them to become a considerer again for your brand. So there are the 5 rules today. Like I say, we have many more, but I'm just going to pass you back over to Barrett.
Well, that ends the presentation for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you found the content thought-provoking and interesting, and something that you can apply to your own business. Look out for more webinars that will be coming in due course, and we'll be contacting you and letting you know of those, where we uncover other insights taken from our retail banking study and the analysis that provides. And if you have any specific business questions, something that's keeping you awake at night that you think our data can help you with, please do get in touch, and you'll see our email addresses on this last slide. Just simply pop us an email and we'll be happy to help. That's it from us. That's from me and Mark. And
thank you.
Hopefully see you soon. Take care now.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.